I remember the glow of the Christmas lights on my parents' porch in Charleston, South Carolina, hazy and soft, like a memory I was not sure I wanted to step back into. The wind carried that salt and pine smell the Low Country is known for, and for one brief moment, I told myself I could survive this night. I had survived worse in this house. I could do this too. Before I take you further, let me ask you something. What are you doing while listening to this story? For me, on the night all of this happened, I was standing on the edge of my parents' brick walkway with my heart in my thick throat, trying to convince myself that family did not have the power to break me anymore. My name is Megan. I am 33 years old, and I work in soil research for the Georgia Agricultural Extension Center. I love my job, even when it sends me home covered in red dirt and smelling like wet fields. But my family sees it differently. To them, I threw my life away when I chose farming science instead of law or finance. Tonight would be the proof of that. Though at the time, I still believed I could get through a single Christmas without being reminded that I was the disappointment. I stepped inside and the heat from the house wrapped around me. The living room was already full. My sister Megan was in the center of it all, laughing that practiced laugh she used in courtrooms. People always said she was the golden girl. Taller, polished, flawless makeup. A perfect attorney with a perfect office in Atlanta. She was engaged to a man named Ethan who worked in corporate property. Investment, a man who wore confidence like a tailored suit and treated anyone outside his circle, like static in the background. As soon as I entered, conversations dipped. Eyes slid toward me. That polite smile people use when they are deciding how cruel to be while still pretending to be kind. My mom was the first to greet me. And even that word greet does not fit. She walked over, looked me up and down, then said, "I thought you were coming earlier. We have been waiting on you." I told her I had work that ran long and that I had driven straight over. She sighed the way she always does when I mention my job. It is the sigh that says she wished I had chosen a different path. Before I could take off my coat, I heard Megan behind her, loud enough for the guests near her to turn. Megan said, "Everyone was wondering if you would show up alone or with that fiancé you keep talking about." My stomach tightened. I never told her I had a fiancé. I told her I had someone important in my life. She was the one who ran with the word fiancé because she wanted something to hold over my head. I said, "I never told you he was my fiancé. He is my boyfriend, and he is coming later. He had work." I felt nearly every set of eyes in the room shift. Megan smiled, the kind of smile that makes you brace for impact. "Oh, right, he works in the fields or something like that. Did he get stuck watering pumpkins?" A couple of people laughed too quickly, eager to stay on her good side. My dad was across the room near the tree, and he joined in the joke without even looking at me. He said that boy was covered in mud the last time we saw him. Hard to imagine he owns a clean shirt. That was true. The first time my family met Logan, he had driven straight from a test site in southern Georgia, wearing old work, pants and a shirt smeared with soil. I remembered thinking he looked beautiful. My family just thought he looked poor. Tonight, they were ready to use that memory like a knife. Someone else said, "Well, maybe he is not coming at all. Maybe Megan made him up." Megan laughed and added she has always been good at pretending. Remember when she said she wanted to help farmers save the South from drought? And look at her now. I felt heat rise in my face. Not anger at first, but embarrassment. That is the thing about humiliation. It hits you before your pride has time to defend itself. I tried to walk toward the kitchen, but Megan followed, her voice louder. She said, "So where is he exactly?" "You know, the mystery man with no social media and no last name. We can verify." I said quietly, "He has a last name, and he will be here." He texted, "He is driving up from Savannah." Ethan joined in then. He said, "It is convenient that he is never around when people want to meet him." My dad shook his head and said, "Sweetheart, you do not have to pretend to have a boyfriend just to feel better about yourself. You can come clean. We will not think less of you." I almost laughed at that. They could not possibly think less of me than they already did. Before I could answer, I felt a soft hand on my arm. My grandma June. She had always been quieter than the rest of them. A small woman in her late 70s, with silver hair she kept pinned back with a tortoiseshell clip. Her eyes were sharp, though. She missed nothing. She whispered, "Come outside with me for a minute. I need to tell you something." I followed her out onto the back porch where the air was cold and still. The reflection of the Christmas lights shimmered on the pond behind the house. She gripped the railing with a trembling hand and said, "Megan, listen closely. Someone in this family has been signing papers about your grandpa's old land. Your name is on those papers, but it is not your handwriting." A heavy, uneasy feeling dropped into my stomach. I asked who. She shook her head. "I have my suspicions, but I wanted to warn you before things get worse." I stared at her, stunned. Why would someone sign my name? Why involve me? She said, "Because you are the easiest one to blame. They think you will stay quiet." Inside the house, laughter rose again, loud and sharp. My sister's voice cut through the air. They were probably still making jokes about Logan. And about me. I pulled my phone from my pocket to distract myself. A new message appeared. Logan said, "I'm on my way. Traffic is slow." Something feels off. Are you all right? I typed back, "Just get here, please." He sent one more message. "I will. I am almost there." I slipped the phone back and looked at my grandma, who was watching me with that same worried look she had the day my grandpa was buried. She said, "You need to hold your ground tonight. They may not believe you now, but truth has a way of showing up." I nodded, even though my chest felt tight, even though a part of me wondered how much more I could take before breaking. We stepped back inside, and the warmth hit me again, heavy and suffocating. Megan spotted me instantly and announced loudly, "Well, look who is back. Did you call your imaginary fiancé for backup?" More laughter, more eyes, more heat burning my face. I opened my mouth to answer, but then I heard it, the low rumble of an engine outside, a sound no one ever hears in this neighborhood. Someone near the window gasped. There is a limo pulling up the driveway, and just every whisper halted. I turned toward the door, my heart thudding in a slow, stunned rhythm. Logan had arrived, and nothing was going to be the same after this. People moved before I did. It was like the whole room shifted in one breath, chairs scraping, glasses clinking against each other as people hurried toward the front windows. The noise rose and then cut off so suddenly that my ears rang in the silence that followed. I stood there for a second, glued to the floor. Grand June touched my elbow, a small, silent reminder that I was not imagining any of this, that someone really had pulled into my parents' driveway in a long black car that did not belong in our quiet cul-de-sac. The first voice I recognized was Ethan. He was near the window and he said he could not see who was inside, but it was definitely a limo. Then he laughed and said there must be a neighbor trying to show off. Megan chimed in that no one in this neighborhood ordered limos for Christmas. She let the words hang, and I felt the entire room silently fill in the rest of that sentence. No one, except maybe the sister who lies about having a fiancé. My dad walked toward the center of the room with that same posture he used at my high school graduation party, when he gave a speech about how proud he was of Megan. He clapped his hands once to get everyone's attention and said that, whatever was going on outside, we should remain calm and not let anything make the family look foolish tonight. The irony of that almost made me laugh. Almost. My mom moved closer to him, fussing with the edge of her cardigan like she could smooth out her uneasiness, the same way she smoothed out wrinkles in fabric. She glanced at me and then away, like I was a stain she hoped no one had noticed. Someone near the door said the driver was getting out. Another voice said they saw the back door of the limo open. A woman in a red dress whispered that maybe the limo was here to pick up someone important, and let her eyes slide toward Megan and Ethan. My heart was beating in a slow, heavy rhythm that did not match the rest of the room. For them, it was gossip. For me, it was the sound of my life walking up our front path. Megan turned from the window and caught my eye. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. She said if that limo was for my mystery man, then this was going to be interesting. She said it so loudly that several guests turned from the window to look at me. Instead, I swallowed and forced my feet to move until I stood nearer to the entryway. My hands felt numb. Somewhere deep inside, Another version of me spoke up. The version that lays out research trials, writes grant proposals, negotiates with stubborn county commissioners. That voice said to stand up straight and breathe. So I did. My dad told me that if this man outside was really my boyfriend, this was my chance to be honest. He said that if I had hired someone, or exaggerated the truth, I needed to admit it before it went any further. His eyes were on mine, but he was talking to the room. I said I did not hire anyone. I said Logan was real and that he was coming to spend Christmas with me because he cared about me. Ethan snorted under his breath and said he had never met a man who cared about a woman, and yet somehow never showed up when he was supposed to. He reminded everyone that the one time my family met Logan, he arrived covered in dirt, and that no man who lived in those clothes belonged in a limo. Megan spoke up again. She said that it was all a little too convenient. She said I had always been creative, always had my head in some dream about saving farms or rescuing dying fields. And now I had probably turned some poor guy from a test plot into my own personal fairy tale. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they were clever, but because they were deliberate. It is one thing for strangers to misunderstand you. It is another thing entirely when your own blood chooses not to see you. Grandma June cleared her throat and told Megan to hush. She said they should at least meet the man before crucifying him. The room quieted a little at her choice of words, but only for a moment. My mom stepped forward then, trying to sound gentle, but landing somewhere between pleading and exasperated. She told me it was all right if I had made something up. She said everyone understood that it was hard for a woman my age and my line of work to find a partner, and that no one would judge me if I admitted I just felt lonely. I looked at her and thought of the nights I spent alone in a motel room near a test site, eating microwave dinners while analyzing soil samples until midnight. I thought of the calls with Logan when he stayed on the line just so I would not feel like I was working in silence. Lonely was not the word that fit my life. Dismissed was closer. I said again that Logan was real, that he cared about what I did and who I was, that he was coming because he wanted to be here with me, not because I begged him for a performance. Ethan shook his head and muttered that it was going to be fun to see how this played out. Through the glass, I could see the outline of the driver walking around to the other side of the big limo. The porch lights caught on the glossy paint. The car looked almost out of place against the modest brick of my parents' house, like a movie prop had been dropped into a family drama nobody auditioned for. My dad walked closer to me. His voice dropped enough that only the nearest guests could hear. He told me that this family had worked hard for its reputation, that Megan and Ethan had important clients here tonight, and that turning the evening into some circus would not be tolerated. I stared at him for a second. My dad, who had spent my childhood weekends watching football, while I sat at the kitchen table, drawing maps of imaginary farms. He never came to a single field day at my job, never asked why drought-resistant soil mattered so much to me. But now suddenly, the family image mattered more than anything else. I said that I was not trying to embarrass anyone. I said I just wanted to share my life the way they had always wanted me to. He did not answer. Instead, he turned to the room and announced that if this man truly was my boyfriend, everyone should be polite and give him a chance. Then he added that if it turned out he was not who I said he was, then we would deal with that truth together. The way he emphasized the word truth made it sound less like support and more like a threat. My stomach tightened again. It felt like I was walking into a trial where everyone else had already agreed on a verdict. Near the window, someone said the back door of the limo was opening. People pressed closer to the glass, some of them standing on tiptoe over the shoulders of others. It struck me then how quickly human curiosity can turn ugly, how fast people shift from conversation to spectacle. Beside me, Grandma June slipped her hand into mine. Her skin felt thin and cool, but her grip was surprisingly firm. She said softly that whatever happened, I needed to remember who I was and not let their fear of looking foolish rewrite my story. I took another breath and felt my chest expand, just enough to keep from collapsing in on itself. Megan moved to stand near the doorway, a little in front of me. She lifted her chin like she was about to walk into a courtroom. I could tell she was ready to pounce on any hint of weakness. She told the people around her that she hoped for my sake this guy was not some desperate field worker I had dragged into my fantasy. Ethan laughed and said if he stepped out in the same dirty boots they had seen before, at least they would know I had not lied about him working in the dirt. The front door still stood closed, but I could feel the energy on the other side of it, the sense that a line was being drawn, and once it moved, nothing would be like it was before. For better or worse, I became suddenly aware of the way my heart had shifted from fear to something else. Not quite hope, not quite angry, something sharper, a refusal to keep bending myself around their comfort. The doorbell rang. For a beat, no one moved. Then, all at once, my dad straightened his shoulders, my mom smoothed her hair, Megan adjusted her dress, and every eye in that room swung toward the entryway. I stood there with my grandma hand in mine, my pulse loud in my ears. As my dad reached for the doorknob and started to pull the door open, my dad opened the door only a few inches at first, like he was bracing himself. Cold night air slipped into the foyer and brushed against my face. Then the door swung wider, and every whisper behind me died at once. Logan was standing on the front porch, but not the Logan my family remembered. Not the man they saw months ago, sunburned and covered in soil after spending 12 hours in a test plot. This Logan was sharp and composed, in a dark coat that fit him perfectly. The collar turned up just enough to frame his jaw. His hair was brushed back. No dirt, no sweat, no sign of the heat he usually worked in. The porch light caught the snowflakes stuck along his shoulders, giving him this almost unreal glow. Behind him, the long black limo stretched across the driveway like it had rolled out of some glossy magazine. The driver waited near the curb, with gloved hands folded neatly. None of it made sense with the man my family mocked, and that was exactly why every face in the living room froze. Logan stepped inside calmly, taking in the crowded foyer, the wreath on the wall, the tree lights reflecting off the hardwood floor. Then his eyes landed on me. His whole expression softened. The eyes first, then the small smile that always made something unclench in my chest. He walked toward me with steady steps, ignoring the stiff posture of my dad and the shocked silence around us. I felt my grandma let go of my hand so he could reach me. He said quietly, "You're doing all right." The words were simple, but the warmth in his voice wrapped around me like a blanket. I nodded, maybe too quickly. He reached out and touched my forearm. Just a small gesture, but it felt like oxygen. Behind me, someone muttered something that sounded like, "Is that really him?" Another voice whispered, "I thought she said he worked in the fields." Megan broke the silence first. She stepped forward with her chin lifted and a careful smile stretched tight across her face. She said, "Well, Logan, this is unexpected." He turned his head toward her, polite but distant, then looked around as if noticing the tension sitting thick in the air. He did not pretend he did not feel it. Logan never pretended anything. He took another step, closer to me now, close enough that I felt his presence steadying me. Then he reached behind him with his free hand and lifted 2 luxury shopping bags I had not even noticed he was carrying. The first was heavy red paper with gold rope handles. The other was a cream-colored bag with a name printed across it that even I knew meant expensive. People shifted at the sight of them. My mom's eyes widened, flicking between the bags and Logan's face, trying to understand what she was seeing. Logan said, "I brought gifts. I hope I am not too late." He handed the red bag to my mom. She hesitated like she could not make her fingers work, then finally took it. I saw the moment she realized it was not just fancy packaging. It had weight. Real weight. Megan stepped closer, her voice bright and sharp. She said, "Well, what is in there?" "Something from the discount mall." Logan did not even blink. He turned to her, reached into the cream bag, and pulled out a smaller white box wrapped in soft ribbon. "This is for you and Ethan," he said, offering it with that same calm politeness. Megan took the box before she could stop herself. Her fingers trembled. So did Ethan, but his jaw tightened like he was trying not to show it. They set the box on a side table and peeled the ribbon away. When Megan lifted the lid, She inhaled sharply. Inside was a pair of crystal flutes from a brand I had only ever seen in wedding magazines. The kind of gift wealthy people gave to other wealthy people. The room shifted again. Guests glanced at each other, whispering under their breath. One of my mom friends let out a soft, "Wow," that cut straight through the quiet. My dad cleared his throat loudly. He said, "This is very generous, Logan. You did not need to." Logan turned to him. I wanted tonight to be special for Megan and for her family. Something in my dad's expression flickered, a crack in that earlier confidence. Maybe he was realizing this night was no longer moving in the direction he planned. I felt my heartbeat begin to settle, just a little, because Logan being here did not just change how the room saw me, it changed how I saw myself. Someone in the back whispered, "He cannot be the same man who showed up in muddy boots." But he was. This was the same man who tested soil with his bare hands, who stayed outside long after sunset to finish a sample set, who taught me how to distinguish nutrient loss by smell alone. And now, here he was, standing in my parents' polished foyer, looking like a man none of them had ever imagined. Logan turned back to me and said softly, "Merry Christmas." He reached into the cream bag one more time and pulled out a small velvet box, tied with a thin ribbon. My breath caught in my throat. He gave it to me gently, like it was something fragile. "This is for you." I untied the ribbon with shaking hands. Inside was a bracelet, delicate, silver, a simple design with a small engraved plate, "For my partner in everything." The words blurred for a second. I blinked hard, trying to steady my breathing. Logan touched my elbow again, grounding me. Behind us, Megan's voice sliced through the quiet. She said, "So, let me get this straight. The same guy who showed up covered in dirt a few months ago arrives tonight in a limo carrying designer gifts." She laughed once, sharp and hollow. "Sounds like someone is playing dress-up." A few guests let out uncomfortable murmurs. Ethan added, "Yeah, kind of funny timing. Looks a little staged." My mom stood frozen, with the red bag still in her hands, unable to say anything at all. Logan did not react the way I expected. No anger, no embarrassment. He just took a slow breath and studied Megan like she had just admitted she did not understand the world she lived in. He said, "I clean up better than most people think. That is all." Megan scoffed. "Right. Because mud turns into money if you scrub hard enough." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. Then he tapped the screen, turned it toward Megan and Ethan, and held it still. I could not see the screen, only their faces. Their expressions changed almost instantly. First, confusion, then disbelief, then something close to shock. My dad stepped forward. "What is that?" Megan's voice thinned. "Is this a joke?" Logan handed the phone to my dad so he could see it himself. I stepped forward so I could finally look. It was an article, a full feature posted earlier that morning. The headline stretched across the top. Logan Hayes, founder and chief executive officer of Hayes Agriscience Innovations, the man transforming crop resilience across the Southeast. My mother gasped. The sound was small but sharp. Megan turned pale. Ethan swallowed hard. Someone whispered, "He is the one who was interviewed on the agricultural news segment last month." I stared at the screen, my pulse climbing so fast it felt like a drum in my throat. Not because I was surprised that the Logan company was legitimate. I had always known he was brilliant. But seeing the article laid out so plainly, being shown not in private, but in my parents' living room, surrounded by every last person who doubted him, hit something deep in me. Logan took the phone back gently and said, "I do not pretend to be anything. I am exactly who I am, in the field and out of it." The room felt suddenly too still, too quiet, too small for all the faces staring at him with disbelief. Then I heard the low vibration of my phone in my coat pocket. I reached for it with numb fingers. A message from Detective Harper. One short line. "We need to talk about the forged signature on your grandfather's land. Documents. Call me when you can." I looked up. My eyes found Ethan first. His face had gone tight. His jaw was stiff. His gaze flickered away from mine for the first time all night. Logan noticed, too. His hand brushed my back, a a soft gesture no one else saw. Everything that had been buried under their laughter began to rise in a heavy, slow wave. And for the first time that night, I felt the shift. The part where the truth stops knocking and starts forcing its way in. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and drew a long breath, steadying myself for whatever had to happen next. I let my hand rest over the phone in my pocket for a second, feeling it vibrate like a small, trapped heart. Then I pulled my fingers away. If I pulled that thread right now, the whole night might unravel on the spot. I was already standing in the center of a storm. I needed one thing at a time. Logan slid his phone back into his coat. The image of the article still burned into everyone's mind, even though the screen had gone dark. The air in the room felt different now. Still sharp, still tense, but there was something else under it. Uncertainty, cracks in the certainty that I was the one making things up. My mom was still clutching the red gift bag he had given her. She looked down at it as if she had forgotten it was there. Logan noticed and gave her a small, encouraging nod. He said that was for her. A little thank you for having him. She blinked, then carefully reached inside. The tissue paper rustled, loud in the quiet room. When she pulled the item out, the guests closest to her leaned in. It was a handbag. Soft leather in a color that went with everything, with a small metal logo on the front. I recognized even if I had never owned anything like it in my life. I had seen that logo in magazines left in waiting rooms and on the arms of women my mom praised for marrying well. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned it over. For a moment, she looked almost frightened by it. One of her friends let out a little sigh and said that those bags cost more than some people's cars. My mom swallowed and said very quietly that it was too much, that he should not have done this. Logan just smiled and told her that he wanted her to have something she would enjoy. That she had raised a daughter he admired more than anyone he knew. The compliment landed softly, but it shook something in me. My mom did not respond, but she did not put the bag back in the tissue paper either. She held it against her side like she was afraid someone might take it away. Megan recovered first. She squared her shoulders, fake smile back in place. She said something about how money did not prove anything. She said that anyone could rent a limo and borrow a designer bag for the night, if they wanted to impress people who did not know any better. Ethan laughed and added that pictures on the internet could be edited. That article could be a stunt. He said that he worked with wealthy clients, and he had never heard of some farm company making that kind of splash. Logan did not take the bait. He turned slightly so his body angled toward me, like his anchor point was me, not the crowd. He reached back into the cream bag and pulled out one more rectangular box, wrapped in textured white paper, then handed it to Ethan and Megan together. He told them it was for their engagement. A real congratulations. Megan hesitated, but the eyes on her were too many, so she took the box. She and Ethan opened it slowly this time, as if there might be something inside that exploded. When they lifted the lid, I saw the reflection of the overhead light catch the crystal. 2 tall champagne flutes, thin and elegant, with a small mark etched near the base. It was the same brand as the set my mom had always said she would buy if she ever won the lottery. Ethan stared at them, then at Logan, his lips pressed together in a line. He muttered that it was unnecessary. Logan replied calmly that love deserved to be celebrated properly. There was something in Ethan's expression then, a flash of something sour and threatened. It flickered, and then he buried it under another smirk. Megan finally found her voice and said that it was nice, but it did not answer the question of who Logan really was. She gestured around the room and said that showing up dressed in a suit with a limo and fancy gifts on Christmas did not erase the fact that the last time he stood in this house, he looked like a hired hand. Logan nodded a little, like he understood the comparison and did not mind it. He said he remembered that day, that he had come straight from a field trial because he had not wanted to, canceled dinner, and that he did not see anything shameful about work that leaves dirt on your clothes. He let the words hang before adding that the article was not a trick, that he had spent years building Hayes AgriScience from a few test plots and a handful of farmers who were willing to try something new. The reason he did not have social media was because he spent more time in fields than in front of cameras. The only reason he agreed to that article was because he wanted funding for better irrigation systems, in counties that kept being ignored. He said all of it in a steady tone. No bragging, no performing, just facts. But each fact undercut every joke my family had made about him. One of my dad's clients, a man who owned several rental properties, cleared his throat and asked Logan a quiet question about crop insurance. Then another person asked something about drought patterns. Within seconds, a few of the guests had turned their chairs toward him, curiosity winning over snide amusement. My dad looked from them to Logan, then to me. His face was hard to read now, some mix of alarm and reluctant respect. Megan could see it too. Her eyes narrowed. She folded her arms and said that articles and gifts did not change the fact that no one really knew the details of his finances or his intentions. She said people could show up looking shiny and still be dangerous underneath. The way she said the word dangerous made me think of more than just money. I felt my phone heavy in my pocket, that unread message from the detective like a small weight pressing against my hip. There was a thread here, connecting Logan's sudden scrutiny, my grandpa land, and the way Ethan kept avoiding my eyes. Before I could follow that thought, my grandma's voice cut through the low hum of conversation. She did not raise it much, but something about the way she spoke made everyone within earshot go quiet. She said, "Ethan, have you told Megan about the loan yet?" The room pulled tight around that sentence. It was almost like someone sucked all the air out in 1 second. Ethan turned slowly toward her. His smile was gone. He asked in a low voice what loan she was talking about. Grand June did not flinch. She said that she might be old, but she was not blind, and she had seen the courier envelopes with his name on them, and the way he hurried to slip them into his briefcase when he thought no one was looking. She added that she knew the law firm whose letterhead was on one of those envelopes, and she also knew that they handled property loans using older family land as collateral. My mom stiffened, clutching the new handbag like a shield. My dad took a step closer, confusion and anger starting to mix on his face. He asked Ethan what my grandma was talking about. His voice was no longer polite. It had an edge to it I recognized from the few times I had seen him argue with subcontractors who tried to cut corners on his job sites. Ethan forced a laugh, too loud and too sharp. He said that Grandma was misreading things, that those envelopes were about his own business deals, nothing to do with the family. Grandma shook her head. Her fingers tapped lightly against her cane. She said that my grandfather's signature had been on one of those papers once, upon a time, and that now my name was showing up where he used to be. But she knew my handwriting, and that was not it. Cold prickled down my spine. Every eye landed on me, not because I had done anything, but because suddenly I was in the center of something none of them had planned for. I looked at Ethan, really looked at him. The easy charm he had worn all evening had cracked. I saw sweat near his hairline, the way his jaw pulsed as he clenched his teeth. Logan shifted closer to my side. He did not speak, but his presence was enough to remind me I was not alone on that rug in the middle of my parents' perfect living room. My dad demanded to know if anyone had used family property to secure a loan, and why his daughter's name was being dragged into it without his knowledge. My mom's voice shook as she asked if this had anything to do with the notices she found tucked under the mail last month that my dad had dismissed as junk. Ethan raised his hands slightly, like he was trying to calm a room full of clients. He said that this was not the time or place, that this was supposed to be a celebration for him and Megan, and that we should not let old land and family drama ruin it. The phrase old land hit me hard. That land was not an old drama to me. It was the field where my grandpa taught me how to kneel down and scoop soil into my hands and tell whether it needed water. It was the place where I first felt like the earth itself was something I could love. Law glanced at me, and in that look, I knew he understood exactly what that land meant. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, a second message arriving from Detective Harper. This time, I did not reach for it. The truth was no longer just knocking. It was in the room with us, circling the edges, waiting for someone to stop pretending not to see it. I drew in a slow breath, feeling every eye, every doubt, every flicker of suspicion, and I realized that whatever came next, pretending to keep the peace was no longer an option. I drew a slow breath and felt the air in the room shift around me. The way everyone stared made it clear that pretending nothing was wrong had stopped being an option the moment Grandma spoke. My pulse pushed against my ribs in a steady beat as I looked at Ethan, waiting for him to meet my eyes. He did not. His gaze flicked instead toward the front door, like he was measuring the distance between himself and freedom. But before he could move, my dad stepped in front of him. My dad was not a large man, but he knew how to take up space when he decided to. His voice dropped into the tone he used when subcontractors tried to cut corners on a job site. He said Ethan needed to explain exactly what was going on and why my name had been used on any documents involving his father's land. Ethan tried to laugh it off. He said everyone was overreacting, that nothing had actually happened yet, that it was all a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by holiday stress. But his voice cracked at the end of the sentence, and the tiny break in his confidence rippled like wind through tall grass. Megan stepped in quickly, touching his arm like she wanted to shield him from the family. She said Grandma must be confused, that she had been forgetting things lately, mixed up dates and papers. She said the envelopes Ethan had were probably about a renovation project or a closing for one of his clients. Grandma lifted her chin. Her eyes were bright and sharp. She said that she knew exactly what she had seen and that her memory was not failing half as badly as Megan wished it was. The room tensed again. I felt Logan take a step closer to me, not to insert himself, not to control the moment, just to let me know he was there. His presence beside me steadied me in a way I had not expected. I kept my eyes on Ethan and finally said his name. Quiet at first, then firmer. He looked at me then. The charm was gone from his face. Something else lived there now. Something tight and calculating. He told it had nothing to do with me. He said my name had probably been mixed in accidentally, and that he would clear it up later when things settled. My mom gasped softly. She looked at my dad in panic, then at me. She asked why my name would be in any loan papers in the first place. I did not answer. I did not have to, because at that moment, my phone began ringing inside my coat pocket. I recognized the vibration pattern. Detective Harper. Again. Before I could reach for it, Logan gently touched my hand, just a brush of his fingers. A small check-in. Are you ready for this? I nodded, even though part of me wanted the floorboards to swallow me whole. I stepped back from the group and pulled the phone out. Every head turned toward me. I could feel the pressure of their eyes like heat against the back of my neck. I answered the call. Detective Harper's voice came through, steady and calm. She said she had spent the afternoon reviewing the documents tied to my grandfather's land. She said the signature pretending to be mine was crude but intentional. She said the email attached to the digital submission had come from a device belonging to someone named Ethan Brooks. My breath stilled in my chest. All the noises in the room faded until I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I asked her if she was certain. She said yes. She said she would need to speak with me in person. She said this was now considered attempted identity theft. My knees weakened for a moment. I felt Logan step behind my shoulder, quiet, steady, like a post set deep into the ground. I thanked the detective, ended the call, and slowly lowered the phone. The room was silent, waiting, holding its breath. I looked at Ethan, and for the first time since arriving that night, something inside me rose up instead of shrinking down. I said that the detective had confirmed someone had tried to forge my signature, and that the documents were tied directly to a device belonging to him. The shift was instant and sharp, a collective intake of breath around the room. A few of my parents' guests whispered things I could not fully hear. Megan's face was drained of color. She turned to Ethan in disbelief. Ethan shook his head, stammering that it was wrong, that the detective must have misread the information. He said he had been helping the family, that he was trying to make sure the land was not wasted by sitting idle. He said that using my name was a placeholder, something he had intended to fix later. My dad barked a sound that was not quite a laugh. It was darker than that. He said Ethan had no right to use any part of this family to negotiate land that did not belong to him. He stepped forward and demanded to know whether Ethan had been planning to sell the property without telling anyone. Ethan snapped then, his voice sharp. He said someone in this family had to make decisions, that the land was just sitting there, untouched, losing value every year, that he had contacts who could buy it at a premium, that he had been doing everyone a favor. My stomach twisted. That land was not losing value. It was part of a soil research trial I had been working on quietly for almost a year. That land was my last link to my grandfather. I said that the land was being used for drought-resistant soil trials. Logan had been partnering with the center to support the research. The room shifted again. Guests turned toward Logan, then back to me, starting to piece things together. My dad blinked in confusion. My mom frowned like she had missed several steps in a conversation she had. Thought she was leading. Ethan threw his hands up and said this whole thing was ridiculous. He said I was exaggerating my role in the farming world, that no one in real agriculture would rely on some girl in a field office to change the future of anything. Then he gestured toward Logan and said that none of us should trust a man who pretended to be some kind of expert but showed up to this house covered in mud last time. Logan straightened. His voice was quiet but carried through the entire room. He said that he did not pretend to be anything. That hard work sometimes looked like mud and sweat. That soil changes did not happen in boardrooms. That he stood in those fields because he believed in farmers and land. That still had life left in it. He paused, then added that he had been funding research on the Carter land precisely because it mattered, because it could make a difference if people stopped trying to sell it out from under the family. My mom blinked, speechless. Megan whispered Ethan's name again, shaking her head like she was trying to wake up from all of this. She asked him if he had really tried to use my name to get a loan approved. Ethan snapped at her to stop making a scene. The words were loud and sharp enough that several guests physically stepped back. Grandma June lifted her cane slightly and tapped the floor. At her age, she did not have to shout to be heard. She told Ethan that her husband left that land to the family, so it would stay in the family. She said smiles. And she was done being fooled. She pointed at me. She said that the land belonged in the hands of someone who understood it, someone who loved it, someone who had poured actual work into it, instead of seeing it as a line on a profit sheet. Heat stung the back of my eyes. I swallowed hard. Ethan's face contorted. He turned toward the door again, like he was calculating whether he could leave before anything worse happened. That was when my dad stepped in front of him a second time. He told Ethan no one was leaving until he explained himself. The room was caught between two breaths. Waiting, tension stretching like wire. Then I felt my phone vibrate again. I slipped my hand into my pocket without looking away from Ethan. Another message from the detective. And this one was even shorter, even colder. We have reason to believe Ethan was planning to transfer ownership within the next 24 hours. The words blurred. My pulse thudded once, heavy and slow, because now I knew exactly what Ethan had been running toward, and exactly what he was running from. I stared at the screen, at those few words, for about 24 hours, and I felt something in me harden. All night I had been absorbing blows and swallowing humiliation, but this was different. This was my name, my land, my work, and my grandfather's memory on the line. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and lifted my head. "Ethan," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "the detective just told me you were planning to move that land out of our family within a day, using my name to grease the wheels." The room seemed to tilt. Someone sucked in a sharp breath. Megan whispered that it could not be true, that there had to be some mistake. Ethan shot me a look that was almost pure anger now. He said the detective was overstepping, that she did not have the full picture, that sometimes paperwork looked different before everything was finalized. He tried to make it sound like this was just business as usual. My dad stepped closer to him. His jaw was locked tight. He said business was one thing, but dragging his daughter into a deal behind his back was something else, entirely. He said he wanted to know if Ethan had ever planned to tell any of us. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes flicked around the room, counting the witnesses. Megan grabbed his arm. Her voice shook when she asked if he had really done it. Not the soft version he was trying to feed us, but the real thing. Had he tried to sell the land? He pulled his arm away from her. His patience snapped. He said someone in this family needed to think about reality, that the land was worth real money, that sitting on it for sentimental reasons was foolish, that I was out there playing scientist on dirt that could pay for her wedding, their first house, their future. The words stung. Not because I believed them, but because I had heard that tone before from other people who thought anything that did not fit into their version of success was worthless. My mom finally spoke. Her voice was small and thin. She asked if the wedding plans had anything to do with this, if the big venue and the fancy catering and the custom dress had been chosen, because Ethan already assumed the land money would come through. Megan looked like someone had slapped her. Ethan rolled his eyes and said that no one here understood how investments worked, that he had it all under control, and that if we had stayed out of it a little longer, everything would have fallen into place. That was when Logan stepped forward. Until that point, he had let the family speak, let the accusations and defenses swirl around him, never once pushing himself into the center. But now he moved to stand at my side, shoulder to shoulder, and the whole room seemed to notice. He told Ethan that calling theft an investment did not make it any less of a theft. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the living room. He said using someone else's name without consent was not business. It was fraud. And trying to force the sale of family land that was already part of active research was more than disrespect. It was sabotage. Ethan scoffed. He told Logan he had no standing in this conversation. He insisted that Logan was just some guy who played in the dirt and read his own press too much. Logan did not flinch. He said he understood why Ethan felt threatened. That kind of voice terrifies men who are hiding what they have done. He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone again, his fingers moving with an ease that told me he had already prepared for something like this. He tapped a few times, then held the screen up so my dad could see it. It was a copy of an email string, not full of complicated numbers or legal jargon, just simple lines of text between Ethan and a contact at a development firm I recognized from local news. The messages were about projected closing dates, potential profit, next steps. My name appeared in one of them, not as a person, but as a variable. When can you get Megan to sign? My dad's face transformed as he read those words. Color rose in his cheeks, then drained away, leaving him looking older and more exhausted than I had ever seen him. Where did you get this? He asked. Logan said calmly that his legal team had been monitoring interest in parcels, connected to Hayes AgriScience test sites, that any time someone tried to move land that his company had designated internally as a research partner plot, it raised a flag. He said when that flag went up, the team did basic checks, like seeing what names were attached, where the emails came from, who stood to gain. That was when his eyes had landed on my name sitting in the middle of something I had never signed. He added gently that he would have told me sooner, but he had been trying to confirm the pattern before accusing anyone. The room was not just quiet now. It was heavy. Even the Christmas music that had been playing softly from the speakers at the edge of the room had stopped. My mom looked like her legs might give out. She clutched the back of the nearest chair and stared at Ethan like she was seeing him for the first time. She asked him if any part of his proposal to Megan had been honest, or if he had seen our family as a paycheck from the beginning. Megan stared at him with wide eyes, searching his face for something to hold on to. He tried one last time. He said he had been doing all of this for them, that he was trying to secure their future, that the land was the easiest path, that no one in this family except him understood how money really worked. Logan spoke again, his voice softer now, almost sympathetic, like he recognized the desperation under the arrogance. He said that real security did not come from tricking people into signatures. Those good futures were not built on buried lies. He told Ethan that a man who believed the only way forward was through someone else's land and someone else's name was not a visionary. He was just a thief who had gotten used to wearing nice suits. Megan flinched. My dad closed his eyes for a second, then opened them and asked Logan to explain himself fully, to say who he was, not as a headline, but as he stood there in front of us. He needed to hear it out loud. Logan nodded. He tucked his phone away and slipped his hands loosely into his pockets. His shoulders remained relaxed, but there was a firm line in his jaw. He said his name was Logan Hayes, that he was 36 years old, and that he had grown up on a small farm in southern Georgia. He said he watched his parents lose crops over and over to drought and bad soil, and he got tired of hearing that nothing could be done. He told them he had studied plant science, then gone back home to work on the ground instead of staying in an office, that he had started Hayes Agriscience with borrowed money and borrowed equipment, that for years, no one took him seriously because he still showed up to meetings with dirt under his fingernails. He looked around the room and said that the company had grown, slow at first, then faster, once results started to speak louder than skepticism. He said he had never stopped visiting fields himself because he did not believe you could fix the land without putting your hands in it. Then he turned slightly toward me. He said that when he met me at a field demonstration a while back, I was the only one who did not flinch at the mud, that I cared about the trial data more than the fact that his truck was old and his jeans were stained, that I talked about the land like it was something living, not just acreage. He said, not the suit or the dirt. His voice stayed even, but there was warmth in it, a pride that was not about money or recognition, but about what we were trying to build together. My dad listened without interrupting. My mom stared at the floor, her face flickering with too many emotions to name. Some guests looked impressed in a way that would have made me angry at any other time, because now they were only interested in him because he fit a picture they understood. Megan whispered that she had no idea. When he came over last time in those work clothes, she had assumed he was just some hired hand tagging along with me because I was lonely. Logan gave a small shrug. He said he could not control what people assumed, only who he actually was. And somehow, standing there in that crowded room, with my family shame laid bare and my humiliation slowly being peeled away, I realized that the only thing I truly wanted control over was my own voice. I stepped forward out of the small, invisible circle where I had been hiding between Logan's steady calm and Grandma's quiet strength. I looked at Ethan, then at my parents, then at the cluster of guests who had come to my mom's house for Christmas and instead received a front row seat to our implosion. My hands were still shaking, but my voice, when it came, was clear. Tell me the truth, I said to Ethan. This time, I was not asking as the quiet daughter everyone dismissed. I was asking as the person whose name and legacy he had tried to use for his own gain. And the room knew it. Tell me the truth, I said to Ethan. For a long moment, he did not answer. His jaw flexed once, tight and defensive, like he was chewing through a rehearsed excuse. His eyes kept darting toward the front door as if an exit would magically appear for him. I stood there waiting. No raising my voice, no threats, just the truth hanging between us like weight he could no longer dodge. He finally spoke. His voice came out thin, the calm bravado long gone. He said everyone was twisting things. He said he had planned to talk to me. He said the papers were not final and that he had simply taken initiative. His words landed with the dull thud of something half honest and half panic. My mom let out a soft sound. Something between a gasp and a sob. My dad took a step forward, not touching Ethan, but close enough to make a point. My dad's voice was low and steady when he told Ethan to stop circling and say, plainly, what he had done. He told him it was his last chance to speak for himself before the entire situation moved out of family control. Ethan's eyes flicked toward Megan then. She stood with her hands tangled together, knuckles white. She whispered his name and asked him if any part of this had ever been about her, or if he had simply needed a connection to the Carter land. He did not answer her. He looked away like her question was a curtain he did not want to pull back. That silence was its own confession. Tears filled her eyes. She stepped back from him as if distance would protect her from the truth she had tried not to see. I did not look away from him. I said again, just tell us what you planned. My voice was calm, but my hands shook slightly behind my back. He exhaled sharply, ran a hand over his face, and let out a frustrated groan. He said the land was valuable and sitting unused. He said he had talked to buyers who were willing to pay a significant amount. He said he had been close to closing a deal. He called it a business opportunity. My dad cut in. He said the only reason Ethan had been close to anything was because he had. used my name without permission. He said my name had opened the door and nothing else. His voice cracked at the end, and I could tell it was not only anger, it was guilt. Ethan snapped then. All the polished charm he usually carried fell away. He said that if the family had been smart enough to see real value, none of this would have been necessary. He said I had no idea how to leverage what I had inherited. He called my work a hobby. He called my research cute. He said I had held the family back. I felt something inside me freeze and then harden. Not rage, not humiliation, something colder. Something like clarity. Logan moved closer. He did not touch me, but I could feel the warmth of him at my side. He spoke, his voice even and steady. He said Ethan had not simply misjudged the value of the land. He had underestimated the one person who had been tending it, studying it, protecting it. Ethan barked out a laugh, hollow and sharp. He said Logan was playing dress-up. He said no real executive would spend days in fields. He tried to belittle him, the same way he had tried to belittle me. Logan ignored him. He said that the only people who mocked work done with their own hands were those who had never held anything worth protecting. The room shifted then. You could feel it in the air. Guests who had been uncomfortable witnesses at the edges stepped closer, forming an invisible line behind my family. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a man stripped of all the stories he had hidden behind. I looked at Ethan and said, calmly, that the detective had already found proof of his intent. I told him she had evidence tied directly to his devices. I told him the bank had flagged the forged signature. I told him there was no version of the truth where he walked away untouched. For the first time since I met him, he looked genuinely afraid. Before anyone could speak again, there was a knock at the door. Not loud, but firm. My dad walked over and opened it. Detective Harper stepped back inside. She greeted us, then asked if she could speak with Ethan once more. Her voice stayed professional, but she did not hide the seriousness of the moment. Ethan protested, saying he had come voluntarily, that this was a family matter, that everyone was blowing things out of proportion. She told him the bank had sent new documents, that the forged signature matched multiple attempts, that timing and cross-checks placed him squarely at the center. She said they had enough to begin formal questioning. She asked him to come with her. Megan let out a strangled breath. My mom covered her mouth with both hands. My dad stepped slightly in front of me as if shielding me from a blow that had already landed. Ethan looked around, desperate for someone to pull him out of this. No one moved. No one offered him a soft landing. He had run out of places to hide. Logan stepped forward then. He did not gloat. He did not smirk. He simply told the detective that if she needed any research records, email logs, or communication from Hayes Agriscience that tied into the land, he would provide them immediately. His voice stayed respectful, but the message was clear. Whatever Ethan had done, he had done it alone. Ethan's eyes shot toward him, furious and humiliated. He said this was all because of me, that if I had not gotten involved, he would have closed the deal by now. He blamed me for everything. I simply said his actions had exposed themselves. The detective guided him toward the door. His shoulders slumped. His face was flushed with anger and shame. He paused once, looked at Megan with something like regret, then dropped his gaze when she did not look back at him. When the door closed behind him, the house exhaled. Not with relief, not exactly. With finality. I realized then that the real collapse was not Ethan walking out in handcuffs. The collapse had started the moment he realized we were not buying his lies anymore. My mom walked toward me slowly, her expression raw. She asked if I was all right. I said I was tired. Not physically. My soul is tired. She reached for me then, hesitantly, as if she was not sure if she still had the right. I let her hand rest on my arm, but I did not lean into it. Not yet. The distance had been earned. My dad said softly that he had been wrong about me. He said he had been wrong for a long time. The words hung there between us, small and heavy. Guests began filtering out quietly, giving space, offering murmured apologies for staying so long. The house grew quieter with each closing door. Logan touched my shoulder lightly. Just a reminder that he was still there. I turned toward him, and at that moment, the weight in my chest eased a little. He said gently that the worst part was over. He said the truth had surfaced, and it would not sink again. I did not answer. I was too full of everything that had happened, everything that had cracked open inside me. But when I looked out the window and saw the faint sweep of blue light disappearing down the road, I knew this night was not simply ending. It was leading me somewhere I had not expected to go, and whatever came next, I was not walking into it alone. For a moment after I said it, no one moved. No one spoke. The words, "Tell me the truth," hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Ethan looked around the room, his gaze bouncing from face to face, searching for support and finding none. Megan was staring at him with wide, glassy eyes. My dad was rigid. My mom still clutched the back of that dining chair as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Grandma June stood with her cane planted firm on the floor, small but unshakable. He swallowed, then said slowly that everyone was overreacting. He claimed he had been trying to negotiate a better future, that the land was underused, that it made sense for him to manage it. He said he had never meant to hurt anyone. The detective arrived not long after that, blue lights briefly washing across the front windows as her car pulled up. The door opened again and she stepped in with a badge at her belt and a solemn expression that made it impossible to pretend this was still just family drama. She spoke to Ethan in a low, steady voice, asked him to come outside with her, and reminded him that lying would not change the paper trail already in her hands. There were protests, half-hearted excuses, then the sound of the front door closing behind them. When the engine noise faded and the red and blue glow disappeared, the room felt strangely quiet, like the air after a storm, when you are not sure yet what has been destroyed. It was in that quiet that everything else started to land. My dad turned to face me. The anger that had been directed at Ethan shifted and softened into something else. Shame, maybe. Regret. He opened his mouth and closed it again, like he was trying to find a version of an apology that did not sound small, next to what had just happened. My mom was the first one to speak. She looked at me, really looked, not at my clothes or my hair or my job title, but at my face. Her voice shook as she said she was sorry, not just for tonight, but for all the years she had brushed off my work as a hobby, as a placeholder, until I did something she thought mattered. She admitted she had been embarrassed that her older daughter spent her days in fields, while other people's daughters were in offices and skyscrapers. She said she thought if she pushed hard enough, I would change, that I would wake up one day and want what she wanted for me. Hearing her say it out loud hurt in a way that felt clean, like lancing a wound. I had spent so many years guessing at her disapproval that part of me almost did not know what to do with honesty. My dad stepped closer then, his shoulders sagging. He said that he had been proud when Megan became a lawyer because it was a story he could tell his friends, something simple they admired. He said he did not know how to explain what I did, so he did not try. It was easier to stay silent than to risk sounding foolish. He looked at Logan and added that seeing the Logan article, hearing him talk about the land, had made him realize how small his understanding had been, that he had not seen what I was building because it did not come with a neat title or a plaque on an office door. I felt all their eyes on me, waiting for me to absolve them, to sweep it all into a tidy pile labeled family and move on. For most of my life, that is what I would have done. Smoothed things over. Said it was fine. I turned myself into a bridge between their comfort and my hurt. This time, I did not. I told them I appreciated their apologies, that I believed they were sincere at this moment, but I could not pretend the damage was small, that laughing at my job, at my love life, at my choices, had not carved lines into me that would take time to heal. I said it plainly. I told them they had treated me like a disappointment for years, because I did not fit their picture of success. I told them they had made me feel like I had to perform worthiness. Tonight, that performance was supposed to be my relationship. I glanced at Megan then. She had not spoken since the detective left with Ethan. Her mascara had smeared near the corners of her eyes. She looked fragile in a way I had never seen. She took a breath and stepped toward me. She said she owed me more than one apology. She confessed that she had been cruel on purpose, that every time she made a joke about my job or my boyfriend or my life, It gave her a quick hit of superiority she had become addicted to. She said it like she hated herself for it. Then she said something I was not prepared for. She admitted she had been jealous of me, not of my career or my bank account, but of the way I kept choosing what mattered to me, even when it did not earn applause. She said she had chosen the path our parents wanted because it was easier to be praised than to sit with their disappointment. She had built a life around being a good daughter and did not know who she was outside of that. Hearing my sister admit she was jealous of me felt strange. For so long, I had believed I occupied the bottom rung of their family ladder, the one everyone climbed over to get where they wanted to go. To realize that someone standing above me had been looking down and wishing for the freedom I had, even while she mocked it, twisted something inside me in ways I knew I would be unwinding for a long time. I did not have grand words to answer them with. I just told them the truth. I told my mom I was tired of shrinking to keep the peace. I told my dad that if he was proud of me, he needed to say it when there was not a crisis, not just when a man in a good coat vouched for my work. I told Megan that I loved her, but I would not be the punching bag she hit whenever she felt small. Then I said that if we were going to have a relationship moving forward, it would have to look different. It would need boundaries. They would have to accept that my work, my choices, my partner were not up for debate or ridicule. Silence followed. Not the tense kind from earlier, but something more thoughtful, heavy but not suffocating. My mom nodded slowly. She said she did not know exactly how to change, but she wanted to try. She asked me, in a voice almost careful, how? How did she start to fix something she had spent decades breaking? I did not answer right away. How could I? There was no 3-step plan for rebuilding trust when the foundation had never really been poured. Logan touched the small of my back, a quiet reminder that I did not have to carry this alone. He spoke up, his tone gentle. He told my parents that change did not start with big gestures, but with small, consistent ones. That listening without interrupting, asking questions without already having the answer in mind, choosing not to make jokes at someone else's expense. Those were simple, but they added up. He said they did not have to understand every detail of soil research too. Respect the passion behind it. Just like not everyone in his life understood why he cared so much about drought and runoff and microorganisms, but the ones who loved him still showed up when he needed them. My dad looked at Logan with something like gratitude, mixed with discomfort. My mom looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face anew. Grand June stepped closer to our small circle. She reached for my hand and gave it a squeeze. She said she had always known I would be the one to fight for that land, that she had watched me as a little girl walk the rows with my grandpa, asking questions about every plant, every patch of soil, and knew the love was real. She told my parents softly that they had mistaken a backbone for rebellion, that there was a difference. The words lodged in my chest, warm and painful all at once. People began to drift then, a few guests slipping toward the kitchen, others gathering their coats. The party, if it could still be called that, had splintered. The tree lights still twinkled, the food still sat out on the buffet table, but the mood had broken wide open. You cannot go back to small talk once you have watched someone almost steal a family legacy. In the middle of that quiet rearranging, my phone buzzed again in my pocket. For a second, I almost ignored it. I was so tired of incoming hits, so tired of bad news delivered in the form of a lit screen. But habit won. I pulled it out and glanced down. The number was one I did not recognize, but the area code made my heart hiccup. Athens, the city where the University of Georgia was based. I hesitated, then stepped back from the cluster of family and slipped into the hallway near the stairs. The noise from the living room faded to a soft hum. I answered the call. A woman's voice greeted me, warm and professional. She introduced herself as Dr. Harrison Assistant from the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. She said they had been reviewing my recent work on soil moisture retention and the preliminary results from my trials on my family land. My hand clutched the phone a little tighter. She said the department was in the process of creating a new leadership role for a regional research program focused on drought-resistant practices. They wanted someone who understood both the science and the realities on the ground. She mentioned my name had come up more than once. Then she asked if I would be open to discussing a position as lead investigator for the new program in the coming year. For a second, the world narrowed to the sound of her voice and the pounding of my own heart. The hallway seemed to tilt gently. All the years of feeling invisible, all the nights alone in field trailers and labs, all the snide comments about my life choices from people who had never once read a single page of my work, collided with this one unexpected invitation. Behind me, I could still hear my family, their voices lower now, softer, raw around the edges. I leaned back against the wall, closed my eyes, and tried to find my voice. Because in the span of a few hours, the people who had always made me feel small had been exposed as the ones who did not see clearly. And now, someone outside this house, someone who had looked at the numbers and the outcomes instead of my clothes and my relationship status, was telling me I was exactly the kind of person they needed. I opened my eyes and drew in a slow breath. Know that whatever I said next on that call was going to change everything. Again. When I walked back into the living room after that call, it felt like I was stepping into a different version of the same night. Nothing in the house had changed. The tree was still lit. Plates still sat half empty on the dining table. My parents still stood in the same place, but something in me was not the same at all. Logan caught my eye first. He moved toward me, reading my face the way he always did, like there was a language there only he understood. He asked quietly if I was all right. I nodded and heard myself say that the call had been from the University of Georgia, that they wanted to talk about a new leadership role in soil conservation, that my work on our land was one of the reasons my name had come up. For a second, his face just lit up. Not exaggerated, not performative, pure relief and pride. He said he knew it. He said he had been waiting for the rest of the world to notice what he saw the first day in that field. My mom, who had been hovering near the edge of our small circle, heard enough to understand. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were not just shock and shame. There was something like wonder in them. She asked in a small voice if that meant they thought my research mattered. I said yes. Simple. Yes. My dad stood a little straighter. He cleared his throat, like he was searching for words that did not sound clumsy. He told me that whatever came of the discussions, I had done this on my own, that no one could take that away from me. Guests began making excuses to leave then. Some of them offered careful hugs. Some just squeezed my shoulder in passing. Everyone looked a little dazed as they walked out into the cold night, like they had come for a holiday gathering, and somehow ended up watching a whole life turn on itself. By the time the last car pulled away, it was just immediate family and Logan left inside. The house felt too big for all that had been said. My mom insisted on packing leftovers for us. She moved through the kitchen on autopilot, spooning mashed potatoes into plastic containers, wrapping slices of ham. It was what she knew how to do when she did not know how to say more. I let her fuss. It was a language of care she had been speaking my whole life, even when her words had cut deep. Logan and I drove back to my apartment later that night in his truck, the limo long gone. The contrast made me smile a little. Out the window, the streets of Savannah were quiet. Wreaths hanging on lampposts, colored lights blinking in the windows of small houses and corner stores. My head leaned back against the seat, and exhaustion settled over me like a heavy coat. He reached across the console once and laced his fingers through mine. We did not talk much on that drive. We did not have to. The silence between us was not empty. It was full of everything we had just survived. When we finally crawled into bed, the sky outside my window had the faint gray glow that came just before sunrise. I did not remember falling asleep, only that at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up to find Logan shifting closer, wrapping an arm around my waist like his body was reminding mine I was safe. The next morning, my phone started buzzing before I even opened my eyes. I groaned, rolled over, and grabbed it off the nightstand. There were messages stacked on top of each other, emails from work, missed calls from unknown numbers, texts from friends, a few from people I barely knew who had been at the party. And then one notification that made my stomach flip. I saw a tag from the university department account. Dr. Harrison had posted a thread about new regional research initiatives. In the middle of it was a photo taken at one of the field demonstration days. I was in it, eeling in the dirt, holding a clump of soil in my hands. looking to a small group of farmers who stood in a loose half-circle around me. My hair was shoved back, my jeans stained, my face serious and focused. The caption mentioned my name and my preliminary results on moisture retention. It called the work promising. It said the program would be leaning on researchers like me as they expanded. Within an hour, people were sharing it. Extension agents I had met once at conferences, farmers, a couple of my old professors, someone from a local agricultural podcast. The comments were full of small clapping hands and words like proud and about time. I felt Logan shift beside me. His voice was still rough with sleep when he asked what was going on. I told him about the post and handed him the phone. He studied the screen for a long moment, then looked back at me with that same quiet pride. He said, "There you are. That is how I always see you." The next message I opened was from Megan. It was longer than I expected. She said she had seen the tweets, the picture from the field, the mention from the university. She said she had never really understood what I did before, not in a concrete way. She wrote that seeing strangers praise my work made her realize how small her view of me had been. Then she said she was sorry again, not for the 10th time in a shallow way, but like each word had weight behind it. She ended it by saying she had spent half the night reading about soil, conservation, and land rights because she wanted to understand the world I lived in. She said she hoped when I was ready, I would let her in. I stared at that part for a long time. Another text arrived while I was still lying there. This one was from my dad. It was shorter. He wrote that he had seen the post. He said 3 words I had waited my whole life to hear, without qualifiers. "So proud, Em." Then he added that when things settled, he wanted to take me and Logan out to dinner to celebrate. Not Megan, not the whole extended family, just us. The invitation hit me harder than I expected. I put the phone down and rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. The white paint had a small crack near the light fixture that I had never not really noticed before. It ran crooked, like the line between the life I thought I had and the one that was forming around me now. Logan propped himself up on one elbow and watched me. He asked what I was thinking. I said I was not sure my mind had caught up yet, that in the space of one night, I had nearly lost my name and my land, then somehow gained a new future and a different version of my family. He nodded like he understood more than he said. Later that week, I received an email from a regional agriculture magazine. The writer, a woman named Carla, said she had heard about my trials through the university and wanted to do a feature on practical drought strategies that real farmers could use. She wanted to come out to the land, walk the rows, and ask me questions on site. There was a time when the idea of being interviewed would have made me shrink. Being seen had always felt like something dangerous, but now, after everything, the idea did not terrify me. The work was not just mine anymore. It belonged to the farmers who had trusted me, to my grandfather's memory, to the land itself. So I said yes. Carla came out on a bright, windy afternoon. She wore boots that looked barely broken in, but moved carefully enough that I knew she respected where she was. She asked smart questions and listened closely when I talked about irrigation, timing, and cover crops. She did not treat me like a novelty. She treated me like an expert. At one point, while we were standing near the fence line, she glanced toward the old oak tree at the edge of the field and asked about the history of the land. I told her about my grandfather, about the summers I spent here, about the night someone tried to take it from us, and how close they came. I did not mention names, but I did not soften the truth either. When the article came out a few weeks later, it was titled something simple, "Keeping Roots in the Ground." My name appeared near the top, and the photographs showed the land in a way that made my chest ache. Rows of green, dark, rich soil. A snapshot of me and Logan standing side by side, both in work clothes, smiling at something outside the frame. My mom bought several copies at the grocery store and handed them out to friends, like she had been waiting for this her whole life. My dad framed one for his office at home, right above the desk where he managed his renovation projects. It was not lost on me that the same people who once rolled their eyes at my work were now pointing proudly at my picture. But this time, I did not feel like I needed that pride to stand upright. It was a bonus, not a foundation. One evening, not long after the article came out, I was sitting on the tailgate of Logan's truck at the edge of the land, watching the sun slide down behind the tree line. The air smelled like cut grass and the faint metallic tang of well water. Logan leaned against the open door beside me, one boot propped on the bumper. He asked if I had thought any more about the role at the university and how it would fit with everything we were doing here. I told him I was leaning toward accepting, that the idea of guiding larger projects excited me more than it scared me, that I liked the thought of spending part of my time in classrooms and meetings and the rest, with my hands still in the soil. He smiled and said that sounded like me, half on the earth, half drawing maps for other people to follow. I laughed at that. Then I asked how he felt about basing more of his work around here instead of always being on the road. He said he had been waiting for an excuse to put down deeper roots, that if I wanted this place to be home, he would adjust gladly. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, the sky turning shades of orange and purple that made the fields look almost unreal. I did not know yet about the dinner months later where my parents would raise their glasses and toast my courage. I did not know about the wedding under the string lights or the way my family would slowly learn to show love without cheap jokes. It's sometimes on that tailgate, all I knew was that for the first time in a long time, my future felt wide and solid at the same time, like land you have walked your whole life, but are finally allowed to claim as your own. So I told her, yes. Yes, I wanted to talk. Yes, I was interested. My voice sounded calm somehow, even though my knees felt unsteady and my heart was pounding in my throat. We agreed to set up a meeting after the holidays. When I hung up, I just stood there for a moment in the dim hallway, phone still in my hand, listening to the muffled sounds of my family in the next room. I remember thinking that one phone call had just undone years of doubt. Not because a title would fix everything, but because someone who did not know my family at all had looked at my work and seen value in it. When I walked back into the living room, Logan was waiting near the edge of the crowd. Our eyes met, and I knew he could tell something had changed. Later, when things were quieter, I told him about the offer to discuss a leadership position. His face broke into that slow grin I loved, the one that started in his eyes and moved outward. He said he was not surprised, that he had been waiting for the rest of the world to catch up to what he already knew. The rest of that night blurred into small pieces. My mom took my hand for a second longer than usual when we said goodnight. My dad was standing on the porch looking at the dark line of the trees in the distance where my grandfather landed, his shoulders heavy with more than holiday tiredness. Megan sitting on the bottom step with mascara smudged under her eyes, staring at her phone like it belonged to someone else. Ethan was gone, taken away earlier to answer questions I had spent the whole night not wanting to ask. The next few months, most of what I heard about him came secondhand. There were charges, meetings with lawyers, talk of plea deals. He lost his job with the investment firm. The engagement with Megan ended quietly, with no big fight, just a slow unraveling as she realized the future she thought she was building had been framed with other people's property and lies. But life also expanded in ways I had not expected. The meeting with the university turned into several. I drove to Athens on a gray winter morning and sat in a glass-walled conference room while two senior faculty members asked me about my research, my field trials, my ideas for expanding drought-resistant practices across rural counties. They did not blink at the mud on my boots when I showed them photos. They leaned in when I talked about farmers by name. By early spring, they offered me the role, lead investigator for a regional soil conservation initiative. It came with more work, more responsibility, and a title that made my mom tear up when she read it on the letter. Our family did not magically become perfect. That is not how real life works. There were awkward dinners and moments when my mom slipped back into old habits, and I had to gently remind her that my life was not a punchline. There were days when my dad still bragged more easily about Megan cases than my field results. But there were also small changes. My mom printed the article about my research that ran in a local agricultural magazine and taped it to the refrigerator like she used to do with our school awards. My dad asked to come with me to one of the test sites in early summer, and I watched him step carefully between the rows, bending down to touch the soil like he was meeting an old friend he had misjudged. And then there was dinner. It happened on a warm evening in late May, at a small restaurant near the river. The kind with soft lighting and white tablecloths and the sound of silverware clinking gently against plates. Logan sat beside me. My parents sat across from us. Megan sat next to my mom, quieter than I remembered her ever being at a table. My dad raised his glass first. He said he was proud of me. The words came out halting at first, like they were trying on a new suit, but then they settled. He talked about watching me carve out a life on my own terms. He said he admired that I had built something real without waiting for anyone to hand me permission. My mom spoke next. She admitted she had spent too many years more concerned with how things looked than how they felt. Seeing the land almost ripped away from us had made her realize how little control she actually had, and how foolish it was to waste energy judging the one person who had been trying to protect it all along. Megan lifted her glass last. She did not talk about Ethan or the broken engagement. Instead, she said she had started taking on more pro bono cases involving rural land, disputes, and environmental issues at her firm. That working on those cases made her think of me, of what we almost lost, and that it felt like one small way to make something better out of what had happened. I listened, my fingers lightly wrapped around the base of my water glass, and felt something inside me loosen. Not all the way, not completely, but enough to breathe a little deeper. The land itself changed too. With Ethan out of the picture and the forged documents unraveled, the title stayed exactly where my grandfather meant it to be. In our family. But not just sitting there. Logan and I expanded our trials. We brought in a few graduate students from the university to help collect data. We worked with local farmers who were nervous at first, suspicious of outsiders promising new methods, then cautiously hopeful when they saw early results. The land became what it had always wanted to be. Not a bargaining chip or a memory, but a living experiment in what was still possible. By the time summer settled fully over Georgia, the fields were thick with green. The sky stayed bright late into the evening, and I found myself standing on that same land in a dress that moved when the wind shifted, with flowers braided into my hair and my heart beating hard in my chest for an entirely different reason. We chose to have the wedding there, not in a ballroom or a hotel, but between rows of crops and patches of wild grass under strings of lights hung from poles that my dad and Logan and a few friends had put up themselves. We rented simple wooden chairs. We set up a long table for food catered by a local woman who had been feeding farm crews for decades and knew exactly how to fill a plate so no one walked away hungry. Grandma June sat in the front row in a pale blue dress, her cane resting beside her. She squeezed my hand before I walked down the aisle and told me that my grandfather would have been proud to see what I had done with his land. Her eyes shone with tears, but her smile was steady. My mom cried openly as she watched. My dad did too, though he tried to pretend he was just blinking against the sun. At one point during the reception, I saw him standing with Logan near the fence line, the two of them talking quietly, hands tucked into their pockets. The ease between them was new, earned. Megan helped me pin my veil before the ceremony. Her hands were sure in my hair the way they always had been with delicate things. She said she was happy for me, not with that tight little edge of envy, but with something softer. She told me she had started seeing a therapist after everything fell apart with Ethan, and that for the first time in a long time, she was trying to understand herself without using me as a measuring stick. As for Logan, when I walked toward him, down that uneven strip of ground that we had flattened as best we could, he looked at me like I was the only person standing there. He wore a suit, but I could still see the man who dug his hands into soil, who crouched in fields next to me, testing moisture levels by feel, who answered late-night phone calls when I doubted myself. We said our vows in front of family and friends, and a handful of farmers who had become something like an extended family. It was not a fairy tale, not really. It was better. It was two people who had already seen the worst of each other's fear and the best of each other's courage, promising to keep choosing the work of loving and protecting and building, something that mattered. Later that night, after the food had been eaten and the music had faded and the last guests had driven off down the gravel road, Logan and I walked out past the edge of the lights. The stars were bright. The air smelled like earth that had been warmed all day, and was finally cooling. He slipped his hand into mine and asked if I ever imagined this when I was that little girl walking the rows with my grandfather. I told him no. When I was 8 years old, I had just liked the way the dirt crumbled between my fingers and how the sunset hit the fields. I did not have the words for legacy or justice or revenge. I just knew I felt at home there. Now I understand more. Revenge did not look like screaming matches or big dramatic gestures. Not for me. Mine looked like standing on land someone tried to steal, holding the hand of a man my family once mocked, while that same family watched with real pride in their eyes. It looked like a job that mattered, one I chose and earned. It looked like knowing I did not have to prove my worth to anyone in that house ever again. By the time we walked back toward the glow of the tents, crickets buzzing around us, I felt something I had never fully felt at a family gathering before. I felt at peace with myself. If you are listening to this and any part of it feels familiar, if you have ever sat through a family dinner feeling small or invisible or wrong for wanting the life you want, I hope you hear this clearly. You are not crazy for wanting respect. You are not selfish for needing boundaries. You are allowed to choose your own path and still deserve love. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.